Yo, 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 what's good, everybody? This is Mr. Composition and MC that writes fiction with the Texas CBD Fair and Market. And this is another episode of the Composition Cannabis Talk. And today's guest, we have frequent guest collaborator and all around awesome person, Grace, with the Texas Cannabis Today. Grace, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh yes, no problem. And it's such an awesome time we're in. 2020 happened. We have 2021. Of course, things aren't gonna be quote unquote the same, but within things starting to open up, within all of these changes that has happened, how have you been navigating it?
It's been pretty interesting. Staying really active on social has been has been absolutely critical for everyone. So that, and then getting, as you we talked about before this, getting creative with Zoom meetings and Instagram lives and Clubhouse and all of that, just finding any way possible to connect with other people in order to continue on, sharing the good gospel of cannabis with Texas, and just kind of and staying informed there. And then whenever opportunities have arisen for us to have safe in-person events, those have definitely been taken. Of course, later, not really 2020, there was no events. Nothing was happening. But now 2021 has happened. A few other things have been popping up that have just, allowed us to reconnect in person again safely.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there was an interview. I didn't get a chance to hear the whole thing, but it was Joe Rogan and Dave Chappelle's recent interview. And one of the things that Joe Rogan was talking about with him, that was one of the things that I definitely saw was an influx of people from California moving to Texas. But Joe Rogan in particular, because he's a cannabis smoker. And so I was just all like, man, you're going away from legal cannabis to come on out to Texas, but I also understand as far as like there's a lot of not just potential here in Texas, let alone, Austin and stuff in general, but especially when it comes into the cannabis space. I honestly feel like right now in the cannabis world, I feel like Texas in this stage where we're currently at, I feel like, we don't just have potential. I feel like we're almost like the way Hollywood was when it first, like the way that everyone knows that when you think about movies, boom, you think about Hollywood. Now, of course, right now in the cannabis field, and it's weird to say that because it's like when you think about cannabis, you're not going to think about Texas. You're going to think about
Yeah.
California. You're going to think about Colorado, you know. But with seeing people like Joe Rogan come down here, seeing as far as the land that's here, and also with different things outside of Texas, I personally feel like Texas is like the way that things are feeling like right now in the cannabis world is almost like Texas is in parallel to that Hollywood in that stages.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. But definitely when we're comparing ourselves to other states, like especially Colorado and California, is they're both two completely different states on how they rolled out their programs. And Texas, unfortunately, isn't gonna vibe like that. Texas is Texas at the end of the day. No matter how much progressive, no matter how great our advocates are, we're still having to compromise on like so many different levels because they don't want to they don't want to be California or Colorado or Washington, but they don't understand why. Like our
Mm,
politicians don't.
yeah.
And that's really what we're fighting against. We're fighting against the stigma of like what cannabis culture is and like what that brings. And I think the smokable hemp ban is like a really good example of that because people are fighting against smoke culture. People are fighting against cannabis culture when actually if you know anything about cannabis culture, and it's just we are all about giving, it's about sharing, it's about wellness. It's not just about I mean, there is a whole portion of definitely the money side of it, and I will not discount that at all. But at the heart of it, even if you're at the very top, for people who own like $1 zillion seed bank companies, they're still like hippies at heart, and they do appreciate it. They just know what they got, and they just know who they are dealing with. And I don't take that personally, because while I won't be dealing with them with my businesses, because I don't have millions of dollars to spend, because etc. So I think that's something that we're definitely up against, and how we look at it, and being really not strategic, but like, yeah, being strategic of like learning from these other states and connecting with other advocates and other people in different realms, whether that be from the tech side, so you're talking about extraction, all the way down to like the retail portion on how you present products. There's so much to learn, because at the end of the day, it's about word of mouth. It's about really connecting with your community. And if you don't have that trust, it doesn't matter how fancy you are. It doesn't matter that your machine extracts so much oil out of so much hemp or so much cannabis. If people don't want it, they're not going to buy it from you because they don't like you. Yeah. And it's more so because of the trust factor. And that also goes down into like how Texas hasn't really been taking the social equity program seriously. And we're up against right now, New York is putting $100 million into their social equity program alone, and they're working on how that looks long term. We have the same thing with Colorado and Portland. I think Portland's putting in like what? Not Portland. Oregon is putting in like 60 something $million. And then you have states like Arizona that's only putting in $2 million. It's going to be a one-time fee to set up, while their other programs are getting like other millions of dollars. I mean, and I can give facts in that one. It's definitely like taking all that information into consideration. It's like, well, what do you do? Do you actually care about your, not do you actually care about your citizens? I'm not about like pitting people against each other, even groups, because nothing good happens that way, especially if people are trying to absorb information. But like really just sitting back and thinking about like, hey, who is being impacted by this? And it's not even, it's a huge factor of like, is it fair? 100% of what it means to have cannabis on them than other groups of people, and that, you know, including me and like including me with other people, and it's just, that's part that's not fair. But that's the part where I'm really interested in seeing like, but we're dealing with right now, period, next sentence, we're dealing with people who like we're trying to like bribe other people for hemp licenses recently in the news with Sid Miller, like that. And that's a whole different thing that I would need to give context on to go down that rabbit hole. Like, we're definitely in like the Wild West, the early days, and this is just the pre-trials. Like, this is not even like the real deal. Well, this is the real deal, but it's such a new industry that, you know, even 10 years is a drop in the bucket. 15 years is a drop in the bucket of what, it's been legal in California since what, 96. So barely 21 years, and most of it had to have been like incognito because of regulations, and we didn't have the internet back then. So there's a huge learning curve, and then providing that information, and how do you share it, and what does it look like, and who's going to steal it, who's going to not, who's going to benefit from it. Like, it's just this whole anomaly that we all have to like fight through.
Yeah, so, no, I see it in all different types of fields, you know, the same way that I see things that are going on, especially in the cannabis field. You know, I've seen it play out in the music field, I've seen it play out in the art world, you know, all of these different things. And what's interesting is, so this is one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because this is specifically within, you know, Texas and other places where cannabis isn't legal. So the last time that we had talked interview wise, Delta-8 just started. I wouldn't say just started, but it was at that point, you know, started to make it's bubbling and everything like that. And now we see, as far as these different regulations, and people are really trying to go off the deep end, try to be like, no THC whatsoever, y'all not getting high, you know, just whatever it is. And so What has been your experience with Delta-8 on a personal level, and where are we at right now on a state level when it comes to Delta-8 and cannabis in general?
On a personal level, I love Delta-8. There's a lot of different brands I would highly recommend out there. It just depends on like what you're looking for in a product at the end of the day. I will say that quality does matter. If it's a little expensive, I mean, and honestly, expensive is kind of like arbitrary because there are people who provide like a solid product that do really great background, who have like mid-grade cost products, and they're not as high as others, and others don't, have that same quality because it's about supply and demand at that point. Like, and so that is what it is. So at the end of the day, check out the COA, see if you like, I know that's really complicated. I know I have a blog post, I believe, somewhere like talking about breaking down a COA, but if it feels all I will say, if it feels sketchy when you're buying Delta-8, then don't buy it from there. But there is a lot of really good, solid products out there. There's a lot of good, solid people making it. There's a lot of good people who do, and always definitely trust the people who are selling it to you. So if you trust that brand, that they did their research and then that's why it's on their shelf, I mean, it's not that I would, 100% give it a pass, but I would take that into heavy consideration because the people who are selling those products, they're more than likely, a majority of them are advocates for the plant and advocates for wellness and advocates for they're not just trying to get you high, even though it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful side effect. That is not just that's not their main point. And because at the end of the day, to be consistent on who they are, they care about the wellness and they care about the consumer at the end, because it could be your mom that's getting that Delta-8 product. It was because it was their grandma who tried it. You never know. But yeah, so as far as in Texas, right now, it is still legal. As of aware of, nothing has been banned. I know they've tried to ban it a few times. And there have been some ways where they're trying to kind of patch the law, because the hemp bill in general, there is a huge loophole of what it is to sell Delta-9, and that's how Delta-8 was able to get passed. So they're trying to repair that, but honestly, everyone's making so much money that I doubt it's going to move. I would be really surprised. So I'm just going to keep that energy. I doubt it's anything going to happen. Yeah. And just in cannabis in general, there's been, I don't know if any of y'all keep up, I would highly suggest following Inform Texas and of course Texas Normal. They are a great group of folks. Jax Fickle, I forgot to pronounce her name, and Heather Fazio are wonderful human beings, and they are fighting for us every single legislative session. And if you subscribe to their updates, they have total thorough updates. And right now we have 4 cannabis bills that are ready to advance to the Senate. So that's a huge deal. And one of them is also including reducing the penalties for having concentrates on you, which is a huge deal, because if you're caught with concentrate, and let's say you have if you're caught with a concentrate, whatever, and it's illegal, it tests hot, they're going to test that. They're going to weigh that whole entire cartridge. They're not going to pour it out and be like, oh, you had like 15 grams in here. No, they're weighing the metal too. And so that, and anything between 3 ounces, anything right now at 3 ounces is a felony. Anything above that is like insane. So what they're trying to move it down to is where it's a second degree for under 3 ounces, and a first degree if it's between 1 and 5 pounds. So when you're talking about concentrates, that's a huge deal, especially when you're talking about people who are caught with it and you need it for medical purposes. So, and if they ran hot, so I mean, hopefully people don't break the law. Pause. But to each their own. So that, and then of course, yeah, so with that in the medical cannabis, they're expanding it. I know with their expanding it, it's including some other elements as well. So, and because I don't want to make medical claims, even though it's legal, I suggest people go check it out themselves and read what is involved in that, because I don't want to say something here and be like, oh, it didn't, they actually changed that, and something happens, because you I don't know, you never know what happens in these bipartisan debates. So yeah, so they have that, and then of course we're just to focus on the consumable hemp products as well, and just making sure that everything's kind of lined up for the state of Texas, just to kind of be really simple about it.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like when I look at that, and I just got that email today from Texas Normal as well, as far as those four bills, and I'm like, there's so much amazing stuff that's coming up, and I'm like, all right, being able to stay on top of those, and my main thing is for the consumers, so like. You brought up a good point as far as the Delta-8. Now, another thing that I want people to understand is what exactly is Delta-8. So one of the things that, from my understanding, and I've tried it as well, from my understanding, it is CBD sprayed with the cannabinoid Delta-8. Is it true that the Delta-8 is the CBD or hemp plant sprayed with the Delta-8 cannabinoid, and like a it's not like they're growing specific Delta-8 plants, like what exactly is the Delta-8 for people?
For the first question, it's kind of complicated because Delta-8 is a natural occurring cannabinoid. It was discovered in the 80s actually and used with cancer patients. So it is very much a real thing. However, at the level that it's being produced, that is not natural. So more than likely, I can't speak for every single joint or every that is out there, or the flower, every single piece of flower that's out there. But more than likely, you're more likely than not, it's sprayed with like with Delta-8, or if it's a joint, it's usually like sprayed and like dipped in keef or moon rocks, whatever. However, those individuals want to get creative with it, because Delta-8, with the whole debate with it, is it's a synthetic, the mass production produced, it's a synthetic cannabinoid. It is not real. But that being said, it's not dangerous necessarily. And that's why I said before, like, people, when you're buying it, really trust your source on where they're getting it from.
Yeah.
And if it feels sketch, it's sketch, because there are ways to make it cheaper, but it's not necessarily that those ways are bad. It's just that they're not as good for you. Plays a whole part into the debate of the product in general, because I know when I first heard Delta-8, I was like, what is this? Is this spice? Is this like something that's gonna like hurt us? Are people gonna go crazy or whatever? Is it making the cannabis industry look bad? Name it. Like, that all went through my head. So it made me very like nervous to talk about it once I learned about it. But the more I opened myself, talked to producers who actually produce Delta-8, and I don't want to say good versus bad guys, but if a producer doesn't want to try their own product or use their own product, it's not that it's still bad. There might be people in their organization who use it, for all I know, but I don't know. That's weird. In cannabis, that's really weird. People, you want to enjoy, or you want to know what it tastes like for you, because at least that's my experience. Again, there are a lot of people, for like, let's say, for example, if you are become sensitive to cannabinoids after a while, and it could be an age thing. Like, there are so many reasons why you could still be in the cannabis industry but not smoke.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons for it. And so no judgment, but usually they could give you examples of people who've tried it and be like, they will develop a system around it.
Yeah.
So that's all I'll say, like, right there, without like really going into crazy depths. But yeah, just really trust your instincts on that. So with what how Delta-8, I'm not a chemist, so I'm not at all, but for how it's explained to me and how I've known for people, talking to me, talk information from chemists and from lawyers, it's pretty much exactly like Delta-9, but it's just one chemical bond moved over. That's it. So that's the modification portion of it that creates it simple. According to the law, if I remember correctly, it still needs to come from hemp plants in order to be considered a hemp product. So that also means like if it's not coming from, even though, which is so dumb, because if you just take the cannabis plant in general, like something that is grown for THC or that has THC, didn't stop growing at a certain time, because really that's one of the methods that you can control the level of THC within a plant, which farmers stress out about, cutting off the tops, getting that testing at, certain portions of the plant. Those other plants that have cannabis in them or have high THC in it cannot be turned into something else. And I feel like that's such a waste.
Yeah.
But that's just I may have or may not have heard other people with working around to that, but that's not for me to share because that's not for me to share. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just crazy how we just get so tangled up around like certain cannabinoids and like what they do to us versus really, putting the pressure on what this plant is doing to our communities. How is this plant like helping that agriculture in general? Because there's so much that's going on within like that farm. Now you're providing jobs. Are those people supported? Are those people making, are they using, can we focus more on like ethical farming practices versus like, making sure that, are they also using those extra stocks and are they using it for fiber? Or is there a way that where we can do that so we can have more of like a circular portion of, now, well, it can't be circular, but we can have like this port where nothing's wasted.
Yeah.
And there's so many lessons to have from that. And so it's like we're focusing on the wrong thing. And it's funny because like I always talk about how cannabis is a female plant, and one of my friends and I like to joke around is saying like, men are kind of afraid of women because they're afraid we're going to take over their jobs or take over their leadership positions, when in reality there's other stuff that we got to do. Like there's other things I got priorities over. It's like, no, you can do your job, I have other things, just like, that's what I care about. And I feel like that's a lot about like how hemp and cannabis is as well. It's like, you think I'm here, well, while it will take over the world, like it has other things to do. It has to clean the air, it's cleaning the ground. It's like, I gotta like rejuvenate this whole entire planet before I even get to taking over alcohol. And at the same time, you can use me side by side. Like there is literally no competition. It's another element added to how industrial, like just how we have like wood, just how we have is different industries. Hemp is that industry, and that's why it's such a broad subject. And if we just focus on how it's just used for smoking, you're losing out on all the other benefits.
Exactly.
Not even got clothes, fuel, and fiber. We haven't even gone down that route. So
exactly.
It's just like, even with Texas, it's like, oh my God, like chill the fuck out. I mean, chill out, like that's all I want you to do. Let me live my life.
And that's what's interesting, because my whole thing right now is understanding and kind of exploring cannabis in space, not just as far as for the astronauts going or coming back, to help out with PTSD or anxiety or anything like that, but the actual technology, how we get to space, how we travel through space, the gear that we use while we're in space, all of those things. When you think about the hemp plant and just all of the explored possibilities and all the unexplored possibilities. And I'm just all like, for me, I feel like Texas, it's all, not only do we got, NASA and SpaceX and stuff like that, but to literally be able to explore that's pretty much why I made my comic book. Just like to explore the benefits, and what you can do as an industrial plant, like you had mentioned. If everyone solely focus on the fact that you can smoke this, you are missing out on more than likely 99% of what else, this plant can do, because have we even gotten into seeing what it can do in our fuel system? Like, have we even all of those extra, parts that you had said that get chopped off and stuff like that? Could that be converted into fuel? Could that be a more efficient way of being able to run our machines? But who knows, because they're throwing it out, even though I would like to smoke that stuff that they threw out, because it probably sounds like it is probably some super fire stuff. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, so the last time we talked, you'd went through a transition, branding change. And so what sparked as far as that change, and what is the response of that change?
Yeah, so for the Texas CBD blog versus what I am now. Yeah, so the what I with I wasn't always crazy about my initial name. I mean, at first it was like a set of, it was what I was passionate about, and then also keywords. I didn't want to get in trouble. That was really the thing. I was like, if I talk about CBD, like the Facebook, not necessarily the Facebook police, the real police won't be able to come, knock on my door, as long as I keep, a certain level of appearance up. But as I started moving forward, I really knew that what I wanted to build was something bigger than just hemp. It was bigger also that it was bigger than hemp, but it was bigger than CBD. I knew I wanted to talk about what diversity cannabis is going to bring out of Texas and highlight those aspects instead of not just allowing this mainstream narrative talk about what hemp and cannabis is in Texas. And while all of those things are important, we forget that people mostly think they think of Dallas, with when they think of Texas, but San Antonio, Houston, El Paso, the Valley, all of us have been impacted by the drug war in different ways. And I wanted to really show and highlight that, and how because it is such a huge state, what that looks like for the stories that are being told and the diversity that is out there within people. So I really wanted to start fighting for the bigger next big thing, which is legalization, and not just legalization, but again, changing the minds and hearts of everything that's going, that's moving forward, especially considering prohibition started in El Paso. All of that, El Paso was the first city to ban cannabis and marijuana, and it started you don't want to smell like Mexicans. Essentially, it was where all of their, and that's my family. That's who I was impacted by that in many different ways, directly and indirectly. And so, and especially being a woman within that, and how it was targeted. So it's just kind of taking the power back of what that means, and then keeping an open mind and heart to everyone else who is impacted in different ways, because it's not just even about the Latinx community, it's about all of us. All of us have had people who've suffered with elements and sicknesses that could have, while it is, I'm not making medical claims here, but there are ways that cannabis helps and supports us as people, and that also includes reducing stress and anxiety, even if it's just being around it. And if you don't, just being around it. So that alone, and how stress impacts families in America and modern society as a whole, we all can come to agreement that if having this thing that helps us sleep better at night, having this over here that, helps us, you think a little clearer during a business meeting because you got to, you had a rough day starting getting the kids out to school in the morning. There are so many different ways to apply just a little bit of it, and adding a little bit of hemp and a little bit of relaxation. And it doesn't even have to be the psychoactive portion. Well, I mean, hemp is psychoactive. Like, it's just psychoactive differently. You don't feel the impacts of Advil, but mentally it's there. It is changing you. So it's like being psychoactive or not being psychoactive isn't necessarily correct. It's just not psychoactive in the way that they are like, oh my God, they're intoxicated. Yeah. So but just thinking about what impacts that has to families and communities, and you're missing out where there's just so much culture to come from it, and we're ready to start talking about it. So anyway, so that's that was the whole heart behind it when it started. And I feel through Texas Cannabis Today, I'm able to express that more. I've been really busy working because it doesn't pay the bills. So I have other things right now that I'm working on, but I'm jumping back in. I am starting a magazine. And it'll be digital and physical. It's going to start off digital, but I want that distributed across the state of Texas. And I have, I'm looking for content. So if you're listening to this and you're looking to, you don't even have to be the best writer. I will edit it. I have people who will edit. It's just getting the different perspectives is what it is. It's not even just about me. I could write all 20 articles. That's not the problem for me. It's about the different perspectives. It's about people from different cities. It's about different events. It's about all of that. It's not just about one person's and their opinion. So yeah.
No,
that's really what the heart is.
No, that is amazing, because it's so true and that's why, and I mean, that's the same reason, with a lot of the naming of a lot of things as far as in the initial aspect, because, now in 2021, you're able to navigate and, go forth with conviction and not have to worry about being convicted, type of thing, because you can talk about cannabis, like we said before, it's just about getting creative, and so being able, and that's the thing, because of the lack of places that have allowed for cannabis to be legalized, for example, here in Texas, and even though if there's anyone who's going to understand as far as what's been going on with that is going to be, Black people, even though it may not be as far as in Texas, because of course we're not the majority, but, understanding in places like California, places like New York, we understand as far as with that. And the thing is that because of a place like Texas or any place that it's not legal, I hear from people, this is a very beneficial plant, but because of the lack of it not being legal, you have a lack of knowledge and understanding how this plant operates with your body. And there's a lot of people who miss out on the benefits of it because they got a strain that was indica, and maybe their body is a more sativa, but they don't even understand or have even been even introduced to that, because it's not legal. And it's not like you can go into a store and be like, oh, I specifically need indicas, or I specifically need sativas because, if I do this, it makes me completely sleepy. So it's not that you don't need to not, smoke weed or, try the cannabis product in general. It's just that with it being illegal here, people who do interact with it and things like that, you're literally getting what you can get, even though, some people can be like, hey, it's this strain and this, and this. us, being so into the hemp community in general, we understand like, oh, well, each of these strains is going to do something different, and your body, and this strain to my body is going to do something completely different to to that same strain to your body, and so the thing is why legalization is important, is because there's still things that need to be done, for, like you were saying with the cannabis plant. It's just all like, with it being a female plant, it's just all like, look, you worried about this, there's other stuff that needs to be done, before we could, in order to even do that, it needs to be legal, so that way people could start doing these tests. That way we can start doing workshops where it's just all like, hey, we're going to try these different strains, and see how they affect you. You know, this one's a sativa, this one's an indica, just different things like that. And even scientists and medical professionals being able to do these course studies. Literally, when I think about, I can't wait for the day where there's a Texas thing that comes out there and says, hey, come smoke this legal THC, so that way we can see, like, so we can start understanding, how it is. How does the cannabis plant work differently amongst phenotypes and races? Like, how can we even understand or explore these different things when it is not legal? And so one of the questions, and if you have something to add on that, for sure, but one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, now we're in 2021, you're starting to see things, more and more when it comes to branding, marketing, when it comes to cannabis, CBD, hemp in general, different things like that. What are some of the, I wouldn't say trends, sometimes trends isn't the right word, but what type of things are you seeing social media wise or just in the field that you're excited about, whether that be a series that's coming out, whether that be new products that are coming out, tech that you might have heard? What's some of the things that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about seeing more mainstream businesses, like not mainstream businesses, but more like not social platforms, just more companies that aren't hemp, so ancillary, so they could possibly be ancillary companies being more open to cannabis and finding those solutions. And it's easier to find those solutions than it was before. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about the of the availability and like the transparency that we see in front of, like, with businesses and their marketing. Like, they're not afraid to talk about certain things, but there's still different ways that they have to talk about it, just because you have to stay out of Facebook jail or Instagram jail. So I like really seeing that creativity and it really flourishing that way. And different creative alternative ways to advertise. So my favorite oldie but a goodie way, and I can't wait to see this in Texas, and I've looked in to see how much it costs, but I can't wait to see the first person who sponsors a Texas highway in for a Hetson cannabis, because if you go to Colorado, you see that everywhere. So I just can't wait to see who will that first person be. And I know I've thought about it. When I totally have been there, would love to do it. It just gets expensive fast.
Yeah.
But it's like that's what I'm in the future, what I'm happy to see. Just really, at the end of the day, if anyone's here like has a CBD business or a hemp business or wants to get into it, it's really about just kind of like being real about what you have. I mean, at the end of the day, we almost everybody kind of has the same product. So unless you have something that is actually different, but even what I've seen people who brag about, like, I go to hemp expos and I cover different types of events like that. And I've heard so many people like brag about the technology that they have with their extraction. And a lot of them are cool. Like, there's this one company that I can't think of not Metric. Can't think of it actually. Doesn't slip my mind. cool guys, amazing progress, amazing product. So while they're still using the same processes that are tried and true, it's just how they do it, and that's what made them so unique, and what made them stand out to me, and the ability to have a support system of really taking care of their customer, because even though they're a tech company who sells like $500,000 products, they really took pride in taking care of who they were serving. And I was blown away by that, because I know nothing about, well, I have a decent idea of like extraction, and I have extraction knowledge, I have all of this, but seeing it and being able to compromise it on a mass scale, like that blew my mind. And I was very like taken back by like how kind and how thorough it all was. And that really really stood out. It's like same process, like people have been extracting since like thousands and thousands of years. Plant extraction is not new. How you're doing it with the technology and that exact same process have changed because we live in 2021. But how really taking care of those who are around you, really cultivating your community. At the end of the day, if it's just back to marketing basics, and it's back to making sure that you're taking care of that connection, because you have to remember cannabis culture is a huge aspect of cannabis culture. You're not only just going to have these new folks who have never tried CBD and hemp before. While there is a lot of them and normal marketing will work with them, you also have this gap between the alternative community, and they too have mothers who have never probably tried hemp and they've gotten in trouble before. They too have a daughter who they want to trust, but now you're up against those things. And while that is a small portion of the community, it's coming back, word of mouth. Do they trust you? Do they trust you?
Yeah.
Do they trust you? So I think that's like a huge portion of it. And then of course, doing everything in good faith, because that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. But at the same time, back in 2019, during one of my first hemp expos, I'll never forget, somebody said, we're talking about like SOPs and like your businesses and standard operating procedures, and that was like the best way to protect yourself, because then you knew that if something failed, at least you did it in good faith. You tried. You were doing the best you could. In 2019, it was a lot more of a Wild West than it is right now. But it's still like, if you don't know what to do, like just make sure, like, have it written down, doing it in good faith. Like you did your research, you tried. So, and that's really all anyone can ask you to do, because again, it's going to continue to, especially in Texas, it's going to continue to change rapidly. It's going to continue to grow, and new information is going to come out. And, for all we know, like, what if some Delta 27.5 is going to come out and that's going to be poisonous to us? We don't know. I don't want to put any real cannabinoids that I can think of, so I don't want to put that out there. But, it comes back to down what you said too. Like, it all impacts us so differently. Then that's why we can't make medical claims, because it all impacts us so differently.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. And so I wanted to say, so you mentioned tech, and that sounds fascinating. Like I've been able to see a couple of extractions, and just being able to interview and talk with farmers as far as indoor grower and outdoor growers, and the process, and hearing about the different technologies they use. That is amazing. So I wanted to ask you, what technology, whether via social media, using, as far as platforms, or even, devices, different things like that, or to all the way to, even a new way of having lighters and stuff, what type of technology, with everything you've seen going to hemp expos, throwing events, being part of events, being the consumer, as well as being in the field itself, what's some cannabis tech for the everyday people that you could that you wish existed?
I can't think of something at the top of my head, but the coolest technology that I would suggest people look up if you like this sort of thing, is how they're using drones in farming and how they're using it to like monitor their crops and the different types of ways that they use AI to also monitor their crops. And within like if we're talking like outdoor grows, we're not talking like, I mean, I'm sure you could do this on indoor grows and it'd be a lot more controlled, but I've seen this, the only place, no, I've seen it in an indoor grow. The only place that comes to mind is an outdoor grow, but like where there's different types of technology that where that's programmed in order to get a consistent product and to like take care of that. So then you don't need as quote unquote like many growers, because you like what one grower takes care of like what 10 to 15 plants at when max, and then if you have fields and fields of that, that's a lot of people. So if you're just like going around, you know, taking checks of things, and if you're scanning it, it's a lot easier. But really with like the drone technology, it's really cool to see like how it takes in so many different factors, like including the wind, because that's how cannabis is pollinated. And that's how it reproduces. It's through the wind. It's like it, you know, the pollen on the other ones, I think it's pollen, I don't remember, but it tracks on the stigmas on the female plant, and within that stigma, that's how you know have a you know plant. That's where how it gets pregnant, and through all that portion. So that's super duper cool. When it comes to like different like the everyday stuff, it's not necessarily technology, but it's a huge part of the culture, and it is technology, but it's an old technology. But I love paying attention to glass blowers. Glass blowers are like, glass blowing is like one of my favorite like YouTube or TikTok or Instagram dives. If I find a new glass blower, just like if they have videos and the glass competitions, and really seeing how much care and thought that they're putting into these things. And then during like controversial times in history, they'll make comments, and then they'll art reflects their political opinions, which gets really funny. Depending, I guess, when it doesn't even matter what side you're on. It's just the fact that it's made is hilarious.
Right.
So form of expression. So you see the artistic part of that come out of the companies and those people. So I think those are the two things that I really get excited about outside of like the flower portion. But even when it comes to just like bringing back like simple ways to just take care of your plants and for the consumers, even if it's, you know, if you go through the Trichome Institute and you have like using a like kind of like their monocle item, like, so it's like essentially like a jeweler's loop. I think that's actually what it is. And now you can be able to detect if there's mold on your plant. So that's a piece of technology, and you know, because now you're trained to like look for certain things in your plant before you smoke it, or when you're, you know, or if more so if you're like a buyer and you want to make sure that you have good product, not just buying a bunch of stuff that half of it you're gonna have to throw away. So I think that even just like the technology and just that accessibility to old things that have always been there, but just using it in different ways. And I think that's the beauty of innovation. And that's just the beauty of the 21st century, because we have the internet, we have places where we have pools of people that we can crowdsource information from and really find like what's going to work best for that person, and kind of start getting away from the idea that just because you're searching for an answer, like, and I know I suffer with this because like I have really bad anxiety that I'm working on, that I'm getting better day by day, where it's like people so put a lot of emphasis on searching for the right answer instead of putting emphasis on like what works best for you and what do you need right now, and then getting caught up in the big goal picture instead of just solving the problem at where they see. And I know in cannabis is definitely guilty of that. It definitely is, because we see people like MedMen back in 2016 in their heyday. You know, we see people like MedMen. We see people like native roots. You see people like the canopy grows of the world. And you forget that there are subcultures out there that are making a lot more moves because they figured out what works out right now. And they're the ones actually creating impact. And that's how they'll take over. But that's really complicated in general. But I don't know. Being flexible in cannabis is my best piece of advice.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so what is on whether Instagram or on TikTok, what are some whether interesting or funny people in the cannabis space that you're seeing, whether they're doing funny cannabis related, TikToks or informative based TikToks or reels?
I don't know. It kind of depends on like what you're really searching for. If you want funny TikToks, if you just want like a blast of the past, I 100% recommend following Chong on TikTok. I've been in rooms on Clubhouse with the people who manage his online presence, but him and his wife are like super adorable, super duper adorable. Any of those like old stoners, I would 100% like if you have somebody that comes to mind, look them up because they're more likely they're making content and they're probably dropping gems every single day on Twitter. But that's the funniest one I could think of. I don't know why, at the top of my head. On Instagram, if you're looking for Texas stuff, we have the Texas Advocates. You go to my Instagram, on the top, it says our advocates. There's a whole story or dedicated or bubble dedicated to them. So I highly check them out. It includes people like Texas Cannabis Today, Grow House, Hemp Tours, all of those folks. And Grow House does a really good job at really keeping their audience engaged and funny and making like really, not like really monotonous things like interesting because it's them and you appreciate them for them. So that's why you keep them there. They are really cool. If you want more like girly type stuff, which is fun, there's anywhere from like, they're not funny, but they just have really beautiful photos. There's a lot of there's a lot of them in Colorado. I'm trying to like remember their names on the top of my head, their handles. There's a good amount of people. If you really want to connect with like New York people, with folks like, and just kind of mess up your algorithms, I would suggest looking up Hoppy Monkey. Vlad runs that account and he has a team of people. He pretty much does the same thing I do, but in New York. Legit guys, legit, and women. They have a whole diverse team over there. Highly suggest checking them out. And I don't know why Chong was like the only one I could really think of. I'm sure there are tons more, but there's just so many different types of advocates out there who are sharing the information and the good gospel. So
there's one you should check out. She's hilarious, and I actually found her on Instagram, but she's originated from TikTok and brought some of her audience over to Instagram. And her name is, I think, Ebony Gaines. I'll send you her thing on Instagram, but her TikToks are hilarious. And she's just doing like random sort of TikToks, like just different scenarios, all different things like that. And the cool thing is, from her, I learned the art of it's actually the reverse of show and tell. So tell but don't show. That, for anyone listening in the cannabis space, understand those words. Tell but don't show. Like, if you can literally stop yourself, especially on things like Facebook and TikTok, from showing what it is that you have for sale or that you're doing, you will be on the right track. So from her, I was learning more and more the art of tell but don't show. And she does so many things where she'll have like the bong, but there's no flower and no smoke. So she's motioning, the thing, so that way anyone's watching can understand that that's what's going down. And her eyes would be super red as hell. So she's definitely super faded, but she learned how to not show either the flower or her in the act, of her doing it. And so hers are super, super funny. Now, I'm trying to think of what else. So one thing that I wanted to do, and I got just after this, I got one more question. So what I wanted to do, being that we're in this whole new time frame of the pandemic and everything, so I wanted to get creative on weed stories during the pandemic. So do you have any weed stories or experience that happened during the pandemic that you want to share?
Delta-8. So one time I think like the really one was like my first adventure out after like my first adventure out alone because my boyfriend wasn't with me. My first adventure out, I got the bright idea to go grocery shopping, and during that grocery shopping, I decided to try a Delta-8 for the first time. And I come home and it just and like I'm like watching TV, like it's like one of those evenings where it's just chill. Like I don't got anything to do right now, so I started watching that, and I started watching like I was watching like something silly like Ancient Aliens, and right after it came like a show about on conspiracy theories, but like within like Scientology. So I started watching that, and that's where right so like halfway, like not halfway, like 15 minutes in, it just like hits me. Like I'm like gone. I'm like blazed. And I start really freaking out because it was to a point where like everything, because I had like a really religious background. I grew up really religious. So everything on the Scientology side was like really too relatable that I just remember like looking at the TV, looking at the remote, turning it off and just going to bed. Because I was like, I cannot handle this reality right now. Like, because yeah, I was like, yeah. So that was just a load because of course I haven't really had time. We haven't been with each other. But yeah, that was my main one where I just kind of like realized I was too high to relive my past. Usually it's nice to take psychedelics to review the past and the troubles you've gone through. This was not the moment. I was like, bad idea. Back to Ancient Aliens.
Right. When in doubt, throw on Ancient Aliens. You'll be pretty satisfied. And so my last question. So, events are starting to open back up, and definitely I want you to end, with where people can find you and what stuff you got going on with hemp tours and everything like that. But my last question would be, with everything opening back up, starting to open back up, what is one of the things that you haven't gotten a chance to do yet since things are starting to open back up that you're actually can't wait to do, or a type of an event? You know, what are one of those that you're excited for?
I think like more intimate gatherings, but like indoors. I had a friend in Houston. He was doing puff puff paint
Yeah, I heard of him. Yeah.
before everything slow like crashed. So I'm looking forward to stuff like that again. So just indoor things that just it's harder to do outside and or like in like enclosed areas where you can still smoke and etc. Now, especially now it's getting hotter again. That I'm excited about being in like public places, like going to different conventions again. I've already been to one and I'm probably going to Lucky Leaf this weekend. But just hitting those back up and just feeling like safe. I mean, I'm vaccinated, I'm cool, but I care about other people around me, so that's my line. Just getting back into that groove and yeah, just really having like intimate events, but like events where there's more people, bigger places, but it's smaller groups of people. So like 50, 100, not necessarily thousands or 500. So that's really what I'm looking forward to. I do miss that part of community. Even though I have bad social anxiety, I still miss it.
You brought up a good point, like more intimate events. I think people with the pandemic realize that it's not needed to enjoy yourself. There's definitely like a time, but of course, there's still going to be people going to these crazy 30,000 people, events and everything like that. Unless I'm performing, I don't even think that I that I can actually see myself going to that. I've had different, events, shows that I've gone to, but the intimate that 50 or less, even started to get a nice little rhythm of 25, just so many people they want to do, and because there's so many things that go into place. So you have say you throw in events and you're just like, okay, well, I have to make money. I have to make sure that in order to make money, you know, I either got to get sponsors or vendors, and then making sure that there's enough people, you know, to where these vendors are going to be happy. And when you're dealing with something like 25 to 50 people, you know, and it allows for you to start being like, okay, we're going to worry about quality first and foremost. Quality in the fact that, yeah, we got these 25 people here, but this is going to be the coolest. You don't need that many, especially especially for people who smoke. If you're sharing it, we're not even talking about just sharing it, but let's just say, I mean, by the time you get to like the sixth person, you know, it's already, you know, gone. So, you know, being able to get into like these campfire, little bit of people, it's more, you know, intimate. The person, you can actually look at the person and take in what it is that they're saying, you know, versus, huh? What did you say? Da, 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 da. You know, like,
Yeah.
I'm definitely with you there. It's something I'm trying to curate more, and even more so like these healing spaces. You know, one of the influencers that I had interviewed, say hi to, out in Philly, you know, she was doing these almost like healing cannabis events now, and they got the medical cards, and they could literally, I was just like, man, that would be so nice. They were very small events. We're talking the events that you're talking about, you know, now. That's what was going, like the puff and paint, you know, prior to, you know, COVID happening. Those intimate events, you know, you still got vendors, still have different things like that, you know, but they're very small. And I see, as far as, especially when it comes to healing, we're talking about a plant that heals, you know, and usually when you're in that healing space, you don't want to be around a lot of people, you know. Like, think about trying to go through a ayahuasca trip with like 100 people there, you know. There's a reason why the groups are very small, you know, and starting to get more into that as far as those small events, and being, not just feeling like confident about doing it, but just realizing that now more than ever, there's these space. I've been hearing about people who do like little events like in their living room, be like 10 people, you know, charging, you know, $20, and you know, you're just in this space of just people. So I'm definitely there with you on that. That's going to be some really fun stuff. And so, any last minute stuff you want to say before you dive into where people can find you and what events you got coming up?
I think we covered it. We talked about a variety of things this past hour. So if you want to find me, I'm on all across different aspects on social media. I'm most active on Instagram and Twitter. Twitter is TX Cannabis Today, because my name was too long. And everywhere else is Texas Cannabis Today. You'll find me on my website, subscribe to my newsletter there, and I'm going to be dropping my magazine pretty soon and getting that going. So keep up to date with that, and we'll see how it goes. Texas Cannabis Today.
Yes, and thank you so much, Grace, for gracing us with your presence. And
thanks for having me, Kevin. I appreciate it.
But everybody, thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of the Composition Cannabis Talk with your host, Mr. Composition MC, that writes fiction. Peace, y'all. Coming back to earth with a couple gems of wisdom that might take a few decades to decode. So I better get the work on. No need for second guessing, cause it was already written, or was it? Is it all predetermined?
to the plan. Is it all predetermined or devised by your hand? No need for second guessing when you're sticking to the plan. No need for second guessing when you're sticking to the plan. Take control of what you can't control. Break out this handheld, hell made digital.